Hey everyone, CJF Hotshot here, and yes, it has been a hot minute since I've done a video, but this is a fun one. I'm just gonna go and pair famous Flash writers, pretty much all of them after 1989, and pair them with their most iconic artists. The only rule is I can't repeat an artist. So if I, for example, use Howard Porter for Jeff Johns, not saying that I will use Howard Porter for Jeff Johns, but if I used Howard Porter for Jeff Johns, I wouldn't be able to use Howard Porter for Joshua Williamson. So yeah, that's basically the gist. So let's start way back in 1989 with William Messina Lobs. Starting with the writer William Messina Lobs, there is really only one option for Lobs, and that is Greg LaRocque. Greg LaRocque started on Lobs' first issue of The Flash, and Lobs' last issue of The Flash still had Greg LaRocque on the title. Anyone else would kind of be asinine, right? Because, yeah, it is Greg LaRocque. Like, sure, Lobs had guest pencilers, like when LaRocque has taken a month off here and there, but it's Greg LaRocque. There's nothing really else to say. Like, all of the things that Lobs created for the Flash mythos were drawn by Greg LaRocque. Wally's 90s costume, Greg LaRocque. Linda Park, based on Greg LaRocque's wife. You know what I mean? Like, it keeps going and going and going. It's all William Messina Lobs and Greg LaRocque as a duo. And whilst Greg LaRocque did stay on longer than Lobs, into Mark Waid's era, Greg LaRocque is still, whilst you could say he has more iconic stories in Waid's run, his foundations were set in Lobs' run, and ultimately Lobs was on the book. He was on the book longer with Lobs than he was with Waid, because Greg LaRocque stayed on the book for a while. So yeah, it's Greg LaRocque. That's the easiest. That's the easiest answer. Mark Waid. Mark Waid is probably like the first one where you have like a Rolodeck of artists that we could choose from. But I have decided upon Mike Wieringo. We'll go into like other artists we could have paired with Waid in a bit. But for Waid specifically, Mike Wieringo. Mike Wieringo started The Flash after Greg LaRocque left in Flash issue 80. Yeah, Mike Wieringo started in Flash issue 80, we're back on track, and then ended with Flash issue 0, and then did covers after that. And he co-created Impulse with Waid. That is a big factor, let's be honest. It also might have something to do with Wieringo being like my favourite artist of the era, I will admit. And like a bunch of like pivotal points in Waid's run were Mike Wieringo. So yeah, like I put issue 0 as the start of Terminal Velocity, which means as far as I'm concerned, Mike Wieringo does start off Terminal Velocity with a bang. And yeah, it also like encapsulates the DC AU style very much. Like if the Flash were to have an animated series, it'd be Mike Wieringo, and I think Mark Waid would share that sentiment. Also, Mark Waid did work with Mike Wieringo a lot after the Flash. Like, Mark Waid's Fantastic Four run was with Mike Wieringo. And when Mark Waid was fired off the book, Mike Wieringo straight up quit until Marvel resolved it. Like, that's how tight those two were. Like, if we had to, like, choose anyone upon the list of artists that Mark Waid worked with, I think he would say Mike Wieringo. That is the honest truth. So let's go to the next pair of gentlemen who wrote The Flash at the same time with each other, and we basically give us another option for Waid, but we settled it on it for these two gentlemen instead. Grant Morrison and Mark Millar get Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan did most of their run. By the way, I know Grant Morrison is they, them, and I did just describe Grant Morrison and Mark Millar as gentlemen. If that offends, I am sorry. When I said gentlemen, I meant like, to be fair, Grant Morrison did like identify as he, him at the time, so it isn't as bad as if I was like talking about Grant Morrison from nowadays. But yeah, I get it. Don't worry. Look, back on track. Grant Morrison and Mark Millar had Paul Ryan. Like there are like other artists they worked with, like Popman, and the person they worked on Human Race with, who I forgot the name of, and that's why they're not chosen because I forgot. Paul Ryan, most of his work was in the Wade run, I will admit, but he also started the Grant Morrison and Mark Millar stuff as well. Noticeably Emergency Stop and the Mirror Master story, and started off the Human Race, which is about half of the run. Like, that is basically most of Morrison and Millar's, like, tenure on the book. So yeah. Paul Ryan also, like, gave Wally the, I'm calling it the Jeff Johns era suit. That was designed by Paul Ryan, which is basically the 90s suit, but get rid of the white eyes. So the 90s suit, but less cool. Yeah, that I am not dissing Paul Ryan on that. I think that was a writer's decision, or at the very least editorial. But yeah. Right, but seriously. Paul Ryan was also very much like house style, and he is a solid artist through and through. So yeah, it is a shame that he died though. Yeah. Next will be Brian Augustine. Brian Augustine did write The Flash alongside Mark Waid. See, this is my loophole. My loophole is that Brian Augustine also wrote The Flash. Whilst Mark Waid wrote The Flash alone in like the early 90s, he wrote it with Brian Augustine in like the mid to late 90s. So, you know. But Brian Augustine, I have two options for Brian Augustine, either Oscar Jimenez or Paul Pelletier. I've decided upon Paul Pelletier. The Dark Flash Saga and Chain Lightning are like two heavy and awesome stories. Like, they're like Flash fanfares for, yeah. Read Flash, Chain Lightning, and the Dark Flash Saga, basically. Paul Pelletier is very much like, this was also very much like DC house style. Like, you couldn't get more house style than Paul Pelletier, but most of the issues that Brian Augustine works on for The Flash, as a co-writer with Mark Waid, were also with Paul Pelletier. And that's kind of what, like, tipped me over to putting Paul Pelletier for Brian Augustine. So, let's move right along to, I think the next answer is obvious for the next one. So yeah. Jeff Johns, big DC writer. I am known to make jokes about him a lot because there are some stories that I'm not a fan of. But I'm pairing him with the artist that probably helped him with his best stories, Scott Collins. Alright. Earlier in the video I said that it could have been Howard Porter. No, Scott Collins for Jeff Johns. I'm using Howard Porter later. I'm using Scott Collins because Scott Collins did like the first half of Jeff Johns' run. When it comes to like run planning, that was Jeff Johns talking to Scott Collins about the city's design, about how to redesign the rogues, and how to create Zoom. All of the omnibuses, all the spines of the omnibuses, Scott Collins art. That's all I'm going to say. There is no competition, and ultimately it would be between Scott Collins and Howard Porter. Scott Collins was on the book longer with Jeff Johns, and the stories were better in the first half of Jeff Johns' run. So yeah, Scott Collins through and through, my guy. Jeff Johns' guy, Scott Collins. So yeah. So let's move on to Tom Peyer. Now you're thinking, who the hell is Tom Peyer? Unless you know me and you know that it's the guy who did Flash Fast Money and co-wrote Brave and the Bold. But yeah, Tom Peyer is paired up with Freddie Williams II. Honestly, this was just an excuse to pair Freddie Williams II with someone because he is underrated and basically worked on The Flash for a year. Because like he cycled through Mark Waid and Tom Peyer, but Mark Waid's already been paired with Mike Wieringo, and so yeah, we're bringing Tom Peyer in because he wrote The Flash for 6 issues with Freddie Williams II as an artist, and yeah. Full disclosure, it's just because I wanted to talk about Freddie Williams II and like the Wild West stuff, and just to make sure, yes, I am including the Wild West stuff and by extension Flash FMA. We're just lumping the FMA stuff with that because I feel like Flash Fastest Man Alive and Flash Wild West and Flash Fast Money and Flash This Is Your Life all contain into like a run, and so for that run it's Freddie Williams II, and we're using Tom Peyer as a writer stand-in. Yeah. I sound like an asshole when I say that, and for that, I apologize. If the Flash had more of a consistent writing team in the mid to late 2000s, Yeah, it was circling through filler writers. So, admittedly, very good filler writers. Mark Waid came back, Tom Payer, and Alan Bennett. So, yeah. So let's just let's just continue on with the more modern age Flash writers. And the next pairing will kind of be obvious. Francis Manipul and Brian Buccellato are paired with Francis Manipul. Who else was it going to be? It's Francis Manipul's run. He co-wrote it and, did art on it. Francis Manipul and Brian Buccellato are paired together as, a writer duo who also did the art in colours. Yes, for this video, they are both writers. And technically, Francis Manipul is also an artist, so he has an artist slot. Francis Manipul is paired with Francis Manipul, and he co-wrote with Brian Buccellato. Yeah, Francis Manipul, favourite Flash artist of all time. I genuinely give the New 52 a hard time. That is typically because of the run after Francis Manipul's. Francis Manipul's run is it's like my baby, right? Oh my god. I get the problems, but I also see that just the glint in its eyes, just I know what you want it to be, and I think you did a great job at doing that. And oh my god, the art is so beautiful. That is Francis Manipul's run. So yeah. Robert Venditti and Van Jensen, the second half of the New 52, which I don't like because of editorial mandates. I know, I might talk about it one day. They're paired with Brett Booth. I think that's quite obvious. Brett Booth, second favourite Flash artist. I'm not going to knock the run down for looks. This is purely... My hatred for the run is purely because of DC editorial and the TV show. Right, on a serious note, though, they're paired with Brett Booth. Honestly, it was more of a case of, do I pair Brett Booth with them, or do I cheat and put Scott Lobdell on the list, and then pair Brett Booth with Scott Lobdell? Because, they have other artists Venditti and Jensen have worked with. I could have put Jesus Marino, but, come on, it's Brett Booth. Brett Booth was on the book significantly longer, and it's just, it's the look that's, more established when it comes to the later part of the New 52. So, yeah, for any of you wondering, no, just no, Scott Lobdell is not on the list because he only ever worked with Brett Booth, and Brett Booth's been taken. Oops. It's a good thing he didn't write the main Flash book. Alright. But yeah. So yeah, Robert Venditti and Van Jensen get Brett Booth. Yeah. So let's move on to the final two writers, starting with... Alright, Joshua Williamson's run is 100 issues long, and because of that length, I'm cheating in giving him 2. Because it depends on if you're talking about the first half or the second half. This is my disclaimer. The first half of Joshua Williamson's run is defined by Carmine Di Giandomenico. That's where all the Godspeed stuff is introduced. That's when we get Wally West coming back and Ace West coming into fully in the fold. He was in Van Jensen and Vindicti's run a bit, but not really. We see a plethora of speedsters and a bunch of all of those stories. The Rogue story as well. Those early stories are done by Carmine Di Giandomenico. At least that's the look when I assume this stuff that started with DC Rebirth. However, after DC Rebirth ended, by that I mean after Flash War, well technically with Flash War, because it's the artist of Flash War, it's Howard Porter. After issue 50, I am saying Howard Porter. Yeah, I did save Howard Porter for later, and this is why. By the way, Carmine Di Giandomenico is doing Flash 800. Yes. This could easily be based off of the Flash 800 pairings if it weren't for Mark Waid with Todd Nork, because they have never worked together before. This is a disclaimer, and spoils the next one a little. But yeah, Williamson and Howard Porter, Williamson literally said that he'll work with Howard Porter for the longest time if he can, and that, he always saved Howard Porter for the special stuff, like Flash War and Flash Year 1, and a bit of Flash Age, and Flash Finish Line. I think Joshua Williamson put Howard Porter on a pedestal, so much so that it's only right to pair him with Howard Porter, because all of the biggest moments of Joshua Williamson's run happened because happened alongside Howard Porter. For people wondering why there was an assortment of artists at this time, DC Rebirth started a twice monthly schedule instead of a once monthly, which means writers and artists were swapping around the whole time. Not writers and artists. Artists were swapping around the whole time, so you get like A teams and B teams and C teams of artists. But yeah, finally, we get Jeremy Adams. As much as I want to say Sergio Cunha, my heart and soul want to say Sergio Cunha because look at those covers. It's Fernando Pasarin. Like, alright, I've watched enough Jeremy Adams interviews to know that it's obviously Fernando Pasarin. And by the way, I do sound disappointed when I say that. I'm not. Fernando Pasarin has like a very like unique charm to him that I feel like he oozes into the Flash book, and that's very fun. Again, I love this run like my child. So yeah. But yeah, Fernando Pasarin, he worked on Jeremy Adams' first book with like the Gold Beetle stuff, and then like worked into like the majority of the Flash run. Every Flash trade by Jeremy Adams will have Fernando Pasarin art in there somewhere. Whereas the rest of the artists will be like rotated in and out. Like early, I could have made an excuse to say Peterson or Will Conrad, but Fernando Pasarin has objectively done more issues. And I feel like Jeremy would want me to put Fernando Pasarin at the top. So yeah. Fernando Pasarin is the most iconic for Jeremy Adams, and if I were to go early and say who is Simon Spurrier's most iconic artist, they have tapped they tapped Mike Deodato Jr. as like the headline artist for The Flash in September. So I feel like that's kind of obvious that like if I'm to future-proof this video, I'm just gonna like make the announcement right now. I'm pairing Simon Spurrier with Mike Deodato Jr. There we go. That's it. All right. This is a bit of a longer video, I do know, but hopefully this is a bit of fun. Leave your opinions in the comments below, like especially for like who you'd pair with like Williamson and Mark Waid, because I'd get there'd be different opinions there. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think of like these pairings of like writers and artists. This was just a silly video because I ran out of ideas, I'm gonna be honest. Alright, I haven't run out of ideas. I was just low on ideas this week, and this was quite easy. Alright, speak to you soon, everybody. Bye-bye.